Hi, welcome to your Brain Boost. My name is Davis Jones from Easel. This is EAZL. It's an online school that is trying to shake things up, make things more accessible and flexible and affordable so that we can make the higher education system ready for the future, basically. Yeah. Anyway, I'm here with Alan, and Alan is a friend that I met in San Francisco recently. He is a self-described polymath, a futurist, host of Simulation on YouTube, where he interviews all sorts of really interesting people, entrepreneurs and scientists, and he's really interested in consciousness and neuroscience. Am I getting that right, Alan? Did I describe you accurately?
Good, Davis, and such a pleasure to be on Easel's Brain Boost today to talk about this. This is a pressing issue, and I'm really happy to talk to you about it. I really respect you a lot and what you're building with Easel. Let's do it.
Thank you, Alan, and I appreciate that. So what are we going to talk about today? First of all, thank you for being here, viewers. I see a few of you guys are coming in. Note that you can submit any comments that you have related to the conversation in the chat function in the live stream. But we're going to be talking about attention economics today. So I figured that a good way to start the live stream was to talk about what is attention economics. And so I got this definition. It's an approach to the management of information that treats human attention as a scarce commodity and applies economic theory to solve various information management problems. Practically speaking, what is the attention economy? The idea is basically that we're in a world where there's so much information that what is scarce is not information, but it's our attention. So this is basically saying that, we have limited attention. What do we do with it? How is that shaping our brains? Alan, do you understand attention economics to be anything different than what I've described?
That's pretty damn good. Another thing that I really think is important is that it is, with the amount of people that now live on the planet and the ability to digitally instantaneously send a thought to the ecosystem that is the internet now there seems to be so much information, and that's messing with the signal to noise ratio and a lot of other stuff that we'll be talking about.
Yeah, that's definitely a great concept to start with, the signal to noise ratio. I mean, it is interesting when there is so much information. It's like, what do you focus on? And that is really what we're going to be talking about today. I think actually a really fun way to start the conversation is to use the same story that James Williams talked about in his book, Stand Out of My Light. In the description of the video, you're going to see that we talk about James Williams. Actually, if you go on social media, it looks like we haven't put the links in yet. But if you go on mine or yours or Twitter, Easel Twitter, any of the social media links, this Brain Boost was kind of inspired by this guy, James Williams, former Google executive. I think he was basically head of UI, UX at Google. And he's written this book called Stand Out of My Light, which basically argues that we really need to think about how our brains interact with technology. And the fascinating reason he calls his book Stand Out of My Light, there's this really cantankerous Greek philosopher called Diogenes, who apparently was kind of crabby. And Alexander the Great actually really liked him. And so Alexander the Great came and visited Diogenes in his little hovel and said, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And the guy said, "Stand out of my light." So his one wish from Alexander the Great was for Alexander the Great to get out of his sunlight. The reason I think that relates to attention economics is like, what is the sun? And I think James Williams develops this a lot in his TED Talk, and we'll add some links to the description of the video later. But, in the era of so much noise, how do we determine what we focus on? Have you thought about this at all, Alan? Like, do you feel like technology can distract us from things that are meaningful, things that are productive?
Yes, absolutely. And another thing that piggybacks on what you were just describing is the word time within this attention economy that we're talking about. Time being this most precious thing that we have. We only have 2.5 billion seconds on this planet, or 25,000 days. And if you install things like you've linked as well, Stanford University made their habit lab, and you can
Right.
and you can go and download this program that helps you, it's Chrome extension that helps you make interventions. Like it literally starts showing you the seconds that you've been spending on YouTube or Facebook or whatever social platform you're on. And then it really gives you a better idea of exactly how much time you're spending on that platform. But just, yes, I do think that technology and social media can be used for good. Like the positives of information sharing is fucking amazing. The fact that you can just get information about something going on across the world really quickly, that's awesome. But again, with the whole signal to noise ratio, and it's complicating things a little bit, and we need to figure out kind of what's going on with kids as well when their dopaminergic system is getting hijacked by things like clickbait and advertisements, and we need psychometric profiling, all of these different things that I would love to talk to you about.
Yeah, tell me about that phrase you just used. What was it? Dopaminergic processing?
Yeah, dopaminergic hijacking.
Dopaminergic hijacking. Okay, what the heck is that, man?
We have this dopaminergic system, really easily kind of related to the Marshmallow Experiment. And the Marshmallow Experiment is just a famous experiment that was run where there's kids that are given the option to either eat a marshmallow right away or have a delay. If they hold themselves off, they can get 2 marshmallows instead. And so just the general idea is if you're able to delay your gratification just a little longer, which this is a good example for doing something like focusing on your long-term goals. So my long-term goal might be to write a blog post or to make a video, write the storyboard for the video, all this different stuff. But my short-term gratification might be I'm going to go and hit the lottery on Facebook and click those notifications. I'm going to go and hit the email lottery and go and open up all those different emails. And so for us to be able to focus with this top-down processing, the prefrontal cortex executive decision making, say, I am going to focus on my long-term goal. I'm not going to let my phone's on silent. I'm not going to get ding, 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 dinged away from my goal right now. And so that sort of process, this is kind of like the first time with this device that can just go ding, 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 ding all over us, as well as these laptops that have the ability to distract us away from it, that our short-term goals and our long-term goals. Michelangelo took 4 years to sculpt the statue of David. That really gives you an idea of what and there's filmmakers that take years to make movies and stuff like that. And now if I can't get something done in the split of a second, then I'm feeling anxiety. And we even touched on like the mental health issues.
Yeah, I see you wrote that on your whiteboard back there, the mental health issues of all this stuff. Definitely something that I'm thinking about a lot recently.
Yeah. So what do you think about all of this?
Well, so one thing that occurred to me once is that, like, I do think that, well, I'll tell you what I think. I think that, we have at Easel an advanced management training course where it like basically reverse engineered what MIT was teaching at this really expensive program and all that stuff. And it's really cool to have the theories of management science. But what occurs to me is that what makes people win increasingly is having a healthy mental attitude. Maybe healthy is not the right word, but a focused mental attitude.
Yes.
It occurs to me this quote from Bill Gates that's like, people tend to dramatically overestimate what they could build in a year and underestimate what they could build in 10 years.
Yes.
And so anyway, I think the mental health component is real. And I think that the ability to basically get away from these, like, the way James Williams in his TED Talk gets into this stuff is like, we tend to think of technology as this like spotlight. Like, oh, I'm just going to not use Facebook as much. I'm just not going to check my email as much. Like these little miniature, small scope actions. But what he's arguing is that we need to look at the super big picture. My wife is amazing at this. She's just like, yo, you might want to just get rid of whole categories of technologies that don't matter. But yeah.
What interesting question. Yeah. What categories of technology that don't matter?
Yeah, so I'll tell you how James Williams describes this. He says, on an individual level, we have to want what we want to want. And I know that's like pretty meta, but it's interesting because I sometimes feel like, do you ever feel like these platforms and technologies are steering us into a pathway of the experience of life that we basically don't even know if we want.
Don't want, totally.
Yeah. So I mean, I think in that brings up the question: what do we want? And I feel like
The business model's all screwed up. That's why it's led us there.
well, so let's talk about the business model because after all, Easel is a business education channel. And what occurs to me is that there are structural misalignments in many business models. I think, for example, like any publicly traded company is structurally incented to extract maximum profit from from the organization. Who are they extracting maximum profit from? Well, max revenue from the consumers, lowest wages from the employees, and highest returns for the shareholders. So of those three stakeholder groups, you have employees, customers, and shareholders. Two of the three of them are structurally getting squeezed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it occurs to me that that is not a healthy ecosystem long term, and especially when it gets not just in terms of money, but in terms of human value. And so in the attention economy thing, how can you align the incentives of the organization and the stakeholders and the consumers and the investors? And it seems to me like I don't like the alignment has to be about serving something greater than yourself, something that's based on human values, something that's good for the planet. And I'm also not sure if all these technology companies are created equal. I kind of feel like Google is good at managing this stuff better than maybe Facebook. I really don't trust Facebook. Do you have any thoughts on that, Alan? Do you see any differences between the way that these big players in the information economy handle their ethics and their approach to this stuff?
It's a really good question. Man, how many design ethicists are there at Google or Facebook, just as a just trying to do an objective measure on how many of them are there? Because that's always an important question to ask is, are you actually pairing together the philosophers and the ethicists with the computer programmers that are building the AI? Because if you're not, then you have a big problem. And this is the same.
Have you ever heard, like, I know you're interviewing a lot of people in this space. Are there companies or organizations that are pairing up ethics and the development of their technologies that people you've interviewed?
Yeah, there are even people that are working on specifically like AI safety and security. So they're even the ones that are going and putting a huge amount of the ethicists and the philosophers in with the computer programmers. And so just that notion of ethicists that drastically need to be in the space of the attention economy and social media is so important. But again, the business model is all screwed up, because if we take a look at the Twitter or the Facebooks, and what we see is that we see a business model that's based on advertising. The longer that you stay on the service, the more advertisements you see and the more money that company makes. So they don't have an incentive to kick you off the platform after a couple minutes.
What does it do to our brain, Alan? If we're like on a platform for like sometimes with Twitter, you kind of like, you're just like, whoop, whoop,
Yeah.
whoop. Like, what does that do to our brain? What's happening?
Yeah. It's like an unlimited newspaper, I guess, is a way to look at it. And I guess that's an analogy for just the recent history, but even, I guess, pre-printing press. It'd be like if someone was, I guess, just standing next to you and just be able to just basically tweet with their mouth out to you just whatever was going on in civilization that day, just nonstop, and you could either choose to
Why does our brain keep just like wanting to scroll? What's that all about?
It's at least to the degree that I understand it, it's the constant urge for novelty. So we have just an insatiable appetite for new information. But
What's new? What's new? What's new?
One thing about that urge for novelty, though, is that when you when you realize this, the signal to noise ratio of the novelty, you can do things like you can only follow really smart people that you think are really important. You can do things like write, see first in your Facebook feeds. So you can curate your feeds by following specific content, asking to see that content first, getting notifications for that certain content, and then past that, anything else that you can find Chrome extensions besides Stanford's Habit Lab, like Facebook Newsfeed Eradicator, which doesn't even let you see your newsfeed on the desktop version.
And so you seem to be going towards this thing of like manage the technologies well, use the features in Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn or whatever to manage it well versus like don't do it.
Yeah, and that's a good way to look at it. And then there's another way to look at it, which is inbound and outbound. So, here I am in the center, and inbound is all these messages that I get inbound. And then outbound is all the messages that I send out. So I keep my inbound on silent all day, every day, silent, because I don't want to get distracted from my focus of what I'm focused on.
Isn't it weird though? Because I kind of feel like, I've tried to reduce the amount of stuff that I share on social media. Of course, like I'm a media producer, so like I have a lot of content to share. But like sometimes I feel that like it's kind of a unethical approach for me to be on social media, just sharing all my stuff and then not receiving and listening to other people. It's kind of like that person that comes to the party and just talks too much, and you're like, God, just shut up. Do you ever think about that?
That's a good way to put it. It's not necessarily that I only go outbound. So let's put it this way. You're right, where I do end up going on my feed and looking at what other people have posted. I totally end up doing that. But just this general idea of if you are a node and you have all these spokes that are coming into the node, and then you choose to turn off the connectivity that they can't get to you immediately. So if you were to ping me on Messenger, I am not going to ping you back right away. And then there's a certain quality, I guess. If Elon Musk pings you on Messenger via email, you're probably going to reply to him, versus if someone else pings you that is just trying to be like, hey, how are you? And you're just like, I'm making content right now, I can't ping you back. So then you basically get to pick. So if you're working and then you realize, okay, Davis has to send Sally a message about the content that we're making, then you will go and send Sally a message. So you basically get to be in control of your inbox outbox flow rather than other people being in control of it.
Well, one of the topics of this conversation is, are we being controlled? And I want to get into this because I'm kind of passionate about sociology. And basically, I have this feeling that in general, most of us don't make any of the decisions that we think we are making of our own accord. And that we're really constantly making decisions as a result of programming that comes from external factors. We all think that we're so individualistic and in control of our own stuff. In reality, I'm pretty sure that that's almost never the case. And maybe it's in conjunction with stuff. We're saying, okay, we want to go over there, and then you have some other external inputs. Let me be practical about this. So what I mean from a practical standpoint is like, the way that our brains have habituated because of smartphones, because of social media, because of the messages of the government. We live in a democracy. We have a system where in America, we've devolved a lot of responsibility down to individual people, social pressures, status pressures. All these things shape our decisions. And I do think that we're being controlled in some way, but I don't know if that is unique. I feel like throughout human history, human beings have been controlled by bigger forces. Do you think do you agree with me there, Alan? Do you see something different?
Yeah, I'm definitely calculating the variables that you're talking about, and I'm the general sort of feeling of not being in control feels like it's pretty damn real.
Do you feel out of control now?
It's like, Robert Sapolsky talks about this in this book, Behave, which is just that throughout multiple billions of years of evolution, every sort of genetic expression that's occurred since then, and every environmental factor that's occurred since then to make the humans that we are today, that those are way more in charge of us than we are. And so we actually don't have that much control.
So he's arguing that from an like evolutionary patterns cause us to behave in certain ways in general.
Yeah, exactly. And like taking into account something like the amount of control that you have over what you think, like that you're gonna eat, or what you think when when you're in your dream state, or what you think when you make just any sort of decision at all, that it has a whole lineage of billions of years of decision making, and it's not just something that you just came up with in the moment. And then also in terms of the technology that exists today and how that's how in control or not we are, the attention economy being the business model being about attention and how many advertisements I can show you, it's actually further pushed social scientists to figure out how to get you addicted into receiving as much of the dopamine as possible over and over again, and clicking through the lottery system over and over again.
I feel like though we're at an inflection point, honestly. I want to read this one additional quote here that, all right, so this, according to a recent Harvard University study, Chinese state propagandists create 448 million posts on social media a year using a technique known as reverse censorship. 448 million posts a year. As one of the report's authors noted, the point isn't to get people to to believe or care about the propaganda. It's to get them to pay less attention to the stories that the government wants to suppress.
Yeah.
So the idea would be that the attention economy, and I think that in many ways, the American political figures, primarily the president, has used distraction a lot. I know that this is something that Russian propagandists use a lot. So like distraction is almost trying to get us away from the stories that matter, maybe. Do you see any of that?
Absolutely. That's actually probably one of the biggest problems, along with this whole psychometric profiling, distraction.
What do you mean by psychometric profiling in the context of what I just said?
So, for example, the way that what I like on Facebook can generate a average Allen approximately. Mm-hmm. That if you like content that's generally liberal, then you'll be pushed more liberal news-feeded items. If you like things that are more conservative, push more.
Also, it's like distraction on steroids, because you're put into a bucket, and then they're like, cool, whatever we think will do best at distracting you will be pushed to you.
Yeah, and then it gets kind of worsened by other organizations that are able to access this data about you, that then can say, oh, well, because Davis likes this, I can then manipulate the way that he thinks about the world by pushing an advertisement to him that doesn't even exist. It's not even a real thing. But
something that I've been noticing too is like there's a lot of algorithmic stuff is based on grouping you with other people. Like the Financial Times, which I've been subscribed to for a long time, now they're starting this like chatbot news feature that's basically like, we're going to push you the most read stories in the categories that you seem to like every day. And I don't like these types of technologies. I don't like Spotify's music recommender service, for example. If anybody likes that, sorry. But like basically, I don't want to be pushed things that they think other people like me would like, because that keeps me in a bubble. I want my own brain to be directing the direction of my attention.
Yeah, that's good. I like that a lot. This seems like there is a time and place for things that are recommended, and there is a time and place for doing things like understanding the complete opposite of the point of view that you take. Okay, so then one more thought around distraction real quick is just if we're approaching an era, we've had Dr. Roman Yampolsky on the show a couple of times, one of the world's leading AI safety and security researchers. And so if you take a look at the way that we're transitioning to what are called deep fakes. So you can,
What's the name of the person again, Alan?
Dr. Roman Yampolsky, and
Roman Yampolsky. Okay.
I can link it to you. And so what's nuts about this is that if you just take what this era of deep fakes and you just take this idea that I can literally make a computer rendering of Davis that is completely indistinguishable from the real Davis and have him say whatever I want him to say and then put that onto Twitter and say, I captured Davis saying this, then we have a whole new era of problems that are going on. And this is already being worked on. As in whenever, anyone across the planet, Trump or who have you, says, that's fake news, that wasn't me, that was a deep fake, then we have a whole new era of problems that are going to emerge from that.
Let me ask you this, Alan, and I want to just get kind of personal, not like private or anything, but like if you to the extent that you can remove yourself from the pressures of status, and a lot of us have these pressures of paying bills and stuff, and you could say, this is what I want to work on. What matters to me? What are some of the things that you think matter apart from the distractions of all these, these things? Like if you weren't distracted at all, what do you think is worth the focus? What's the myopic things to work on?
That's a good question, Davis. I'm writing about this a lot in this book about time and about the human race, and I'm writing about exactly what you described, which are these pressures that we have in this socioeconomic hierarchy to fucking go up, to increase our upward mobility in there. Yeah. And if that didn't exist, if we didn't have these pressures, I would likely still be working on something similar to what I'm working right now. But also at the same time, I bet I would be passing time a little bit more like if we had that longevity, as in the work that like Dr. Aubrey de Grey is doing with extending life. So if you can get your lifespan out to like how healthy, like how you feel when you're 15 years old, if you can hold that feeling until you're 200 years old, that then I think things would move a little bit differently as well. You might focus more time on traveling, focus more time on just being and like going to the park and just walking around and enjoying life, falling into love multiple times and just spending more time in love. Things like,
I don't know about the just being thing. It's funny, because I just be a lot and I'm like, okay, being is cool. The Buddhist, I'm being, man, I'm being, but like, I don't know. I have some goals and some ambition, but I want it to be channeled in the right way. The only thing I can come up with that I think is something that unifies beyond distraction is that, if you can help people focus on creating value for other people, then it's kind of this virtuous cycle. I kind of feel like at the stage that we are in this attention economy, like, for example, like the fact that Facebook would prefer to distract you from what you want to do so they can make money, that is a zero sum, if not a negative sum game, because they're going to hurt you from them existing. And that's not good. But I feel like if there are things that get you to focus on doing things for other people, making the world better for future generations, then that's a good thing.
That's where you and I align a lot on our values, which is that we care deeply about impacting society in ways that make it a better place for future generations. And let's get there. Let's unleash that soul and that creative spirit in children that are being birthed into the world today.
Yeah, I know you focus a lot on children. It is interesting in the era of social media. I feel like one thing that maybe is coming to an end a little bit is going to be this idea of a parochial relationship between individuals. Like, I think the personal brand, for example, seeks to elevate people above others. I am elevated in this area. And it's one thing to say I am an expert in this area, but it's different to say I am elevated above it. And I think that maybe if we get into this more like contribution mindset, that like what we're doing is co-creating something good, then maybe we'll get away from some of this negative social media stuff, negative technology patterns that seeks to differentiate us. I feel like maybe there's something there about being differentiated versus being contributive and say what, like this word impact, and I'm sorry I'm rambling here, but this word impact kind of gets me sometimes. Impact suggests that there's something wrong, right? I am here to make an impact because there's something wrong. But there's a lot of studies that show that like people generally, they don't want to be impacted, right? They want to elect to partake of something that they want to be a part of. And I kind of feel like this idea that there's something wrong is at the root of a lot of this distraction, right? Like you talked earlier about these mechanisms of distracting us. You know, the liberals want to hear this message, the conservatives want to hear this message. All of this is to tap into this sense of rage, this sense of, oh, there's something wrong everywhere. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure that that is the path forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and this goes really deep to how do we design and construct this technology to maximize human flourishing, and we don't have the answers to that, but we can definitely start pushing ourselves in that direction and we have with what James wrote and with what he and Tristan Harris and Max Stossel are working on with Time Well Spent. Definitely go to timewellspent.io and go check out some of the design techniques that they are working on regarding fixing a lot of the way that we communicate with each other in this attention economy.
One thing I want to also talk about for the viewers who are tuning in with us is that it's also just about like the nature of advertising and marketing. We have a big marketing community here at Easel. And I kind of feel like this idea of the extractive company is coming to an end a little bit. I noticed, for example, that like a lot of companies that were, like I think Coca-Cola is a good example. There was a time in the past when the Coca-Cola CEO said, I think about every day, how can I get Coca-Cola into somebody's belly right now? Yeah. You know, Coca-Cola was a treat. It was a candy that you had as a treat. And the fact that people know this about brands means that these companies that don't act with ethics, I think that they're going to hurt themselves. And I think that as smarter and smarter, as education is more and more pervasive, that these companies that don't use your attention judiciously are going to lose you. I'm thinking about leaving Facebook, which is ironic because I actually am a Facebook ads guy and I like do a lot of Facebook ads, but I would use it for ads, but like not be on it myself, which is kind of weird. But I think they've lost my trust, and trust is fundamental.
Yeah, absolutely, super fundamental.
Well, is there anything that you wanted to share particularly with us, Alan, about, you know, your thoughts on mental health and all this stuff? Because I know this is really your area.
Well, one thing about mental health that I think we don't really think about too much is just what is going on with comparing ourselves to other people rather than comparing ourselves to who we were yesterday. And I think we really learn a lot by just looking at ourselves objectively in the mirror, this sort of process of like self-knowledge, like who am I, looking at myself in the mirror being like, how did I do yesterday regarding my goals, and what do I want with future authoring, what do I want in the next week, what do I want in the next month, in the next year, how do I build those things into the world. And what we're doing on social media a lot of the time is we're seeing someone post a picture of themselves traveling to Bali or whatever, and then we go, oh my gosh, I wish I was in Bali. And then we have this process of somebody posting a picture of them with some materialistic object like a watch or a car or a new house or whatever, and then we go, I want that too. And we kind of get ourselves in that process versus the alternative to that, which I think is really powerful, which is that I'm blessed to be here right now, breathing this air with this roof over my head, with this amount of food in my fridge, and that I have these goals to get further in life, but that I also understand how to be grateful for what I have today. And when was the last time that you saw someone post on social media some sort of sadness or some sort of despair that they've had in their life and how they overcame that? A lot of people are choosing to not talk about things like that, and it's like a high.
One mechanism of control is definitely this materialism that you're talking about, and there's a certain relationship between the advertising platforms. They need to have a culture where we accept the materialism because that is the thing that they're selling to the advertisers, that, hey, these people will respond to your materialism stuff. And then so we're going to advertise there, and then it goes through, and then we buy it. And now the system is enforced. And and I think that that's part of the ethical thing too. Like, I don't trust Louis Vuitton, for example. I don't think Louis Vuitton has my best interest in mind. So I think that there's a relationship between the comparative thing that you brought up and the attention economy, because if we kind of start paying attention to things that are more virtuous, then maybe we won't maybe we wouldn't even receive the ads of the things that are materialistic, because the platforms would recognize that we don't like that stuff.
Yeah, and there's a long way to go with also just getting at this type of understanding of dematerializing to young children, so that when they're born into the world, that they are not going absolutely nuts for all of the newest and what would you want? Would you want the newest sort of technology interface, like the newest sort of augmented reality headsets, or would you want to have, a bunch of different purses, like that sort of mentality? Like, which one if you had to pick? And for me, it's very obvious what would probably be more important for kids. But then again, someone like, maybe Kanye or the designers at Louis Vuitton might say that, oh, well, if you get a child to look at all these different t-shirts or purses or whatever, that then they become a better designer themselves. There's many different variables that go into this argument process.
I love the way you're focusing on kids, though. I mean, for people that have kids, if when you think about this stuff with kids, Alan, what are some of the things that you think about with the attention economy in kids? I know that this is an area of your focus, and it's definitely a way to ensure that, or to work for future generations. If you're helping kids have better mental health, for example, that's good.
Yeah. It's the way that the children are now born into the world that will not know what it's like to grow up without a smartphone. They're born into the world with, even now, kids that are born today will never drive a car, all this different kind of stuff. And so if you give a kid a smartphone when they're 2 years old, you got to really be paying attention. That's around the age of 2 is when a lot of this initial neural infrastructure is really being built and solidified for you over time, the sort of foundational neural architecture. And so if you do things like play Candy Crush on your phone at that age, sure, there's arguments to be made about, a motor cortex and the ability to recognize patterns, and sure, but at the same time, what is that teaching them versus if they're watching videos about the evolution of humanity, or about the evolution of technology, or about futurism and stuff like that when they're 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So it's really about figuring out what the kid likes, and helping be a catalyst for what the kid likes a lot of the time. But this is
well, if we were to wrap up a little bit, one thing that I want to share with the people watching, and thanks for being here with us. And I see Tarun made a comment here. He said, does it lead to being compromised for a better life? I wonder. Yeah, I don't know what you mean there, Tarun, but basically, as we wrap up, I mean, I think that one tool that I want to introduce, one thought point that I want to leave people with, and I want you to comment on this, Alan, is I think that we need to remember to focus on long-term things. It's a good tool. Where, what do I want to build over the next 10 years versus what do I want to build over the next week?
That's good.
Because it seems like it's easier in the attention economy. The problem is that we get micro distracted to oblivion. We're like, what? Okay, micro distraction. And we just oh, it's just a little micro distraction. It's just 10 minutes on Facebook. It's just 20 minutes on Facebook. But that stuff stacks. And over the long term, now you've spent so much of your time being distracted that you didn't do the things that mattered over the long term. I think very few people would say, what do I want to do in 10 years? Oh, I want to over 10 years, I want to get more likes on Facebook. No way. So I don't know. Do you think that's a good tool to kind of keep us focused on the good stuff, Alan?
Yeah, you make a really good point. It's you look at like a week from now, and you're like, what are my goals over the next couple of days so I can achieve my goals in the week? And then you're talking about no one says I want to get more likes on Facebook over the next 10 years. You want to build something profound, something
Profound.
meaningful for you and meaningful for other people, something of value for the world. And to really be able to figure out how to focus on that is super important to do throughout one's life. And that's why you're building easel. That's why we're building simulation.
Yeah, that's why, to create the infrastructure for an undergraduate degree that costs $500, it's going to take us, 4 years. But whatever. I don't have anything better to do.
Yeah.
If I could create an alternative to college that costs $500 and save a bunch of people a bunch of money and help them start their careers without debt, I'm in for that.
Yeah, great work with easel. I'm super excited for the future of that. Yeah.
Well, and thank you for being with us this morning, Alan. I really appreciate you getting up. I know you're on the West Coast, so it's early for you, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun, Davis, and what a great brain boost topic. This was a really good one.
Yeah, I feel like it's squishy. It's hard to really get deep and tangible into it. But I wanted to bring it up because I see this. A lot of people in the easel community are looking for ways to advance their careers. And I think that one of the areas that's most ignored is mental health, thinking patterns, ways of looking at things that are data driven. But there's just so much to the infrastructure of your brain, your thought patterns that matter when it comes to career success. It's not always just these like little tactical things. Oh, I share this thing on LinkedIn with hashtags. Like that's just not going to do it all the time.
Yep. And an interesting thought for your audience, the way that we kind of, commingled this brain boost together is that, easel does, the $500 undergraduate degree of the future. And, simulation does a lot of these thought-provoking conversations and questions with these different diverse global leaders on media streams. So I think that there is an interesting synergy there, and to be able to send each other our followings, I think is a very synergistic. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, totally. All right, we're gonna wrap up the brain boost. Thank you for being here. I'll see you next Thursday at 10 a.m. Central Time. See you later, Alan.
Bye, guys. Thanks for tuning in. See you, Davis.